Everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel where tech meets creativity, and in today's automation video we'll be looking at Excel automation and how you can do an Excel automation using UiPath Studio. So go ahead and jump in. So in my project you see I have my input folder that has 4 Excel files. We have HR, we have IT, we have marketing, we have sales. So in the HR, can view the contents. These are the contents: date, department, expense category, amount, remarks. So it's the same. It's the same data format across all the different departments, but the only thing that differs is the department and the other details. So we have HR, we have IT, this is IT, HR, so you see, marketing, save, marketing and sales. So it's the same. You can also view these contents. Let's see, for the marketing, that's what we have. And then sales, this is what we have. So the task that we have at hand is going into this folder, consolidating all these different files into a single file, and then doing some filtration. So we'll look at some filtrations. Like maybe we could come here in the expense category and we filter out a certain expense category like travel or something. Then we'll come into the amount and we'll maybe filter out some values that are greater than particular value, as you can see. So I'll go in and I'll go in and jump into Studio. So in Studio, when you're working with Excel, you have to have the UiPath Excel activities installed, and so you find that there are certain types of design experiences within Excel. So you have the modern and the classic. So when you come into activities, I can say workbook. So I have these workbook activities here, and these ones, they can work on a machine even though Excel is not on a machine, and they're a bit more faster compared to their counterparts or the other activities that can do the same job. So that's it for that. Then we have these ones, the ones that you see in green. So these are modern. These are part of the modern experience, and these are part of the classic experience. But if you're running version, I'll share a link. I'll showcase something here. So about that modern and classic experience, open a new window. Drag this here. So you see, in the modern experience, you can, if you come this option of projects, and then you change from here. So I'm using the community version, and my version is 2025. That's the version that I'm using. But if you come on the documentation, if you're having an older version, you should expect something like this when you click. So you see that there's modern experience. But if you come on the latest part of the documentation, let me do this. If I come in here, I'll just change this to latest. And you see in the latest modern experience design starting with 24.10. The modern experience design only is on experience design experience available. Sorry, it says starting with Studio 2024.10. The modern design experience is the only design available for all projects. The classic design experience is no longer an option at project level or as a global classic. Activities are still available. Yeah. So I'm using the newer version, but if you're having older version, you should be seeing something different. But at project level, if you come into activities, you see here, you're able to toggle between classic and what? And modern. So if I tick this, so I'll have my classic activities there. Yes, so I'll go ahead and start. So we start off by, so maybe the other thing before we start, for the modern experience, if you come into tools, there is this extension that you can enable, Excel add-in, and it enables you to interact with Excel within the. I'll show you. I'll show you a demonstration project. So I'll come into my activities. So I'm looking for each file in the folder. So iterating through. So I'm clicking on browse for folder. I'm coming into Excel automation, and I'm checking on input. So I'm selecting my input folder. So could do this, right, to check right line. So I could say current file dot phone name. This enables me to access the phone name of the so I could test. I'm running in the back to test. And I'm able to, I'm able to try it through. I'm having HR, IT, marketing, so that's good. So the other task that we have to read the data in Excel into DataTable. So I'm getting my read range. Sorry about that. My mic just dropped. But I'll grab what? I'll pick my read range workbook activity. So this I'll just say current file dot full name to get the name of that will be the path of my file, and then the sheet is sheet 1. You could still investigate. I come here, project, check. So you see that I'm having sheet 1. So it is the same throughout the different worksheets. That's throughout the different workbooks. So if I'm reading this, I'll be reading this into a data table. So I'll come into my properties panel. So data table. So I'll say Control K to create my variable dt, and then I'll call it dt data. So once I do that, enter. So the other thing, once I do that, I have to merge using merge data table. So this is a data table activity. So this read range activity reads my data into system.data table. So you see when I hover over here, something. So you see, if you read that text, is saying represents, if you look closer, it says represents one table of in-memory data. So it's in a tabular form, that's how it stores the data. So I'm merging my source is dt that one, and my destination for now, let me create another data table, call it dt consolidated data, so that will have my consolidated data. So if I try to run this, it's running for me. I'll stop. So if I run this in the bag, so it's saying, I'll remove this. So here, see that it's saying object not set to reference reason being. So I have my dt consolidated, it's now, and dt data. It has some data. So this object merge data object reference not set to an instance of an object is because of this is null. So what we'll do, I will do this. I will use, so we need to initialize this dt consolidated. So I'll do this. I'll get my read range activity. I'll put it outside, right? Put it outside here, outside of the for each folder. I'll pick my input. Like, let me say this since it has some format, and then I'll read the sheet one, and I'll get what my assign activity, and I will say dt consolidated. It is inaccessible inside. So I'll click here, come into my variables panel. I'll widen the scope. It was invisible the other side, so I'll say Excel automation, and then I'll come back here, dt consolidated. So dt consolidated, I'll get my dt. So this one, I can call it dt clone, or I could use any other variable, but I just call it dt clone, and I'll explain in a minute. So this will be dt clone dot clone. So I'll explain what I've just done. So what I've done, initially, what I've done, I'm reading the HR file, Excel file, into a data table, which I'm naming dt clone. Then I'm saying dt consolidated, which is a data table, and I'm saying dt clone dot clone. So what this does, it gives dt consolidated the format for dt what? It doesn't clone the data in dt. It doesn't clone the data in dt clone. Rather, it just clones the format. So initially I'd use the build data table, That's an activity that you can use to build a data table. And I just copied the format, but it was giving me mismatching issues. So I resorted to this as the best solution. So I'm reading, since the Excel files have the same format, I'm just reading this file and I'm cloning the format. Then if I try now run again, if I run in the debug again here, you see now it's running without any without any errors, because if I put, let me use on the right line, when I put a breakpoint. So just this is what we go through while building solutions. So I'll run, yeah. So you see when I send out DT consolidated, it's not what, this is the first iteration. So you see now it has some data, which is now, let me do this first. So I'll use this immediate one also, DT data. So you see my DT data as this data HR blah blah. That's my HR data. How to confirm? I could pick also this name to know the file that you're working with. So you see that that's HR, and after the merging here, so remember merging this with this. So after the merging, if I say now DT consolidated, you see now DT consolidated as the data. So if I continue again and run, so if first pick the file name that you're working with, file name, you see that's IT, and then when I say the data, so if I say the DT data, so you see that my department is what? Department is IT, as you can see from there. Right? So when I say now DT consolidated, you see now I have HR, I have IT, right? So it goes on and on up to when it does that. But maybe the other thing also to showcase about the clone, let me try to restart here. To restart. So with the clone here, when now if I set DT consolidated, you see here, it's just bringing the format, but it doesn't have any data after the DT clone. It's not bringing the data from HR, but rather it's giving me the format of the data table. Yeah, so that's what happens on that. So I'll stop and go ahead with my Excel automation. So we have managed to iterate through the different files in the folder. We have managed to merge all the files into one single file. And then what we're gonna do, so we could get a right range activity, right range workbook activity. So this, once I've consolidated the data, I want to write it into a file, which is of Excel. So I'll drag my right range workbook, right? And I'll pick the path, come into output. So I'll use the name of monthly. I'll call it what? Let me call it. I'll create an Excel file, new Excel. I call it consolidated data. Right? Save, and I'll select this file. So my consolidated sheet name will be consolidated data, and that will be dt consolidated. So if I run this in just run, I'm using Control F6 to run the current file. So if I run this, we should be able to see our output file in the output file in the output folder. So if I refresh here, so I'll see consolidated. If I check consolidated data, sheet 1 does nothing because I didn't try to sheet 1. But if I come in consolidated data, you see that my data is what here, nice and easy using UiPath. But you see what I'm missing. I don't have columns, name of my columns, so that I'll just come back to my, I won't save, I'll come back to my right range activity and I'll check this, add, it does. So I'll save and I'll run again using, I'll first delete the file and I'll run again using Control F6 to run the current file. So if I refresh here, like what you did, open, you see that I have my data here, my Excel and consolidated data. So our next task will filter out amount greater than 3,000, right? Is it feasible? Oh, okay, we could filter out amount greater than, we're gonna get expenses that are greater than 2,000, and as well as we in the expense category we'll be filtering out an expense of type travel, and we'll be using different approaches so that you can see the difference. Because I'm not going, I've not done a deep dive into the entire different approaches of Excel automation, but what I'm going to do, I'll be touching a bit here and there so that you can to like provoke you so that you could do more other reading on your own as well. But we'll be looking at two approaches here. I'll use the LINQ approach, just a basic. I'll be using the LINQ query here. We'll look into that. Maybe later on, if you let me know down in the comments if I could do a series also on the LINQ queries. But for now, I'm going to do a LINQ query to filter out amounts greater than that, and then I'll use a filter just activity so that you can see the both of what that you can see the sides of both words for using the filter activity and also the LINQ. So I'll close this. Will be maybe to repeat for you again. In the amount D, I'm going to use the approach called LINQ queries. So I'll be sharing some resources for your further reading. LINQ queries, I'll be using a LINQ query to filter out this data, and we'll be using a filter activity to filter out some travel. As long as expense has travel, we'll be filtering it out. So I'll go ahead and open my Excel, open my studio, I'll delete this, and I'll get, so I'll do this. I'll first put a breakpoint here, and run in debug. Yeah, I don't need it. So I'll just continue. So I'll delete, I'll remove this. I'll use space to delete. So I'm getting my DataTable DT consolidated. So the LINQ query goes like DT consolidated dot as enumerable dot where, so I'm saying dot where, then function, I'll say row, so I'm saying row, which row we're working with. We're working with amount. I'll explain the to string, missed this. This has to be function. Let me first maximize. Can I increase on the font? Okay, so this will be to string, and I will enclose this into. I'll convert this to an integer. This is VB.NET, so I'm converting that row to an integer, and I'm checking if that integer is greater or equal to 2000. That's what we agreed upon. And I would say do copy to data table. So this converts it to a data table again, and then I'll say rows dot count and see whether there are some items. So we get 3 items that are greater than that. So I'll just copy my LINQ query. So this will work for me. It will do the job for me. So I'll copy this into my clipboard. You see that I'll have it on my clipboard. I stop. And I will come and grab my assign activity. I'll come and grab an assign activity. Value to save. I'll paste that there. Save. Then in my variables panel, I'll come and create. I'll change this. I'll call it DT. Expenses above. Expenses above 3,000. Expenses about 3,000. I'll save. This is of type DataTable, and I'll DT about 3,000. I'll save. I'll copy this axiom activity. I'll write that to a different worksheet. I'll call that a worksheet expenses above 2,000. Sorry, it's 2,000, then 3,000. So I'll come back into my variables panel, and I change 3,000 to 2,000. Save. So when you change from the panel, it also changes here, as you can see. So expenses. So this is my DT. It's DT. Expenses about 2,000. So we can test this out. I'm running file. So it has run 3 seconds. So if I come into my panel and I refresh and I open my consolidated data, so you see I have my consolidated data and also expenses about 2,000. And when I check the amount, you see that all my expenses above what? 2,000. So that's it for the LINQ query. And then the other thing is we're trying to use the filter activity. You can use the filter activity as well. This is the easiest if you're using UiPath. So with this, I would say, so the filter activity, so it takes in a data table. So it's saying config, specify the data table to filter. So it has already pre-made, it has already pre-dictated for me the argument that will be here. So I'll be using DT consolidated, and for the filtered DT table, so I'll call this, I'll press Ctrl K, then DT. I'll call this expenses travel. I'll call it DT travel expenses. Yeah, DT travel expenses, and I'll come into my configure. So this is how it looks like. So in the configure, I'll go with column, which is that column. My column is let me open my file here. So in the consolidated, in column C, it's expense category. So I'll copy expense category, column, double quotes, expense category, and I'm looking for contains, and then I'll say travel, and I'll save this. So I also do the same, copy the activity, and then I'll change the worksheet name like we did. I'll call this travel expenses, and it's coming from DT travel expenses. So that's it. So if I go ahead and run, so it's saying write range workbook, the process cannot. So this is what so for if you're working with workbook activities, Excel has to be closed. So that's the error. So I have to close my Excel file here, say don't save, press OK, and then I will run again. So it has run. So if I come into my project and then refresh, I open my output file, I will see I have my consolidated data, I have my expenses. The spelling is wrong even, I've just realized this. Expenses above 2000, and then travel expenses, and when I check my expense category, all the expenses I have there, they're for travel. So to do a recap, in this Excel automation, we have looked at how we could leverage the UiPath activities as well as UiPath LINQ queries to achieve different results within our automation, our Excel automation. So let me know in the comments whether you have any questions concerning this particular use case, and if you did find the video useful, please drop a comment, like, subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next video. I'm out.